At 11:14 p.m., while Seattle rain blurred every light outside her rented apartment, Gavin Vance called his wife and sounded like a man watching his life disappear from a screen. Clara Vance did not answer on the first ring. She stood barefoot beside the window, one hand near cold tea, the other touching the wedding ring she kept because some objects become evidence before the heart is ready to let them go. On the table behind her lay blueprints, backup drives, legal folders, and notebooks filled with 5 years of work Gavin had once praised in public while learning how to erase her name. When the phone rang again, Clara picked up and said nothing. Gavin's voice burst through the speaker, cracked by panic beneath alarms and shouting inside City Hall's review room. "Clara! What did you do?" he shouted. "What did you do to the City Hall server? The EcoGrid submission is gone. The archive locked me out. Every file says unauthorized. They're asking for an original verification key I don't have. The entire $10 million bid just vanished." Clara looked at the rain. Dark city she had spent half a decade trying to redesign so it would stop abandoning its most vulnerable neighborhoods first. She had imagined this moment as sharp, but as Gavin's stolen confidence collapsed through her phone, she felt no need to shout. "You always had some hidden security method," Gavin snapped. "You touched the server, didn't you?" Clara turned the ring once around her finger and remembered a younger Gavin promising they were building a life together. Then the memory disappeared, leaving only the man on the phone, still calling her work his emergency. "I didn't touch the City Hall server, Gavin," she said quietly. "Don't lie to me," he shouted. "Then why is my name gone?" There it was again, the word that exposed him before the system did. My name, my files, my bid, my project. Even as City Hall rejected him in real time, Gavin still spoke as if EcoGrid had been born from his own sleepless nights, his own field surveys, his own grief for flooded blocks, unsafe bus stops, overheated apartments, and ignored families Clara carried in her mind for years. Clara swallowed once, not because she was afraid, but because the body sometimes reacts to old pain before the mind gives it permission. Then she looked back at the folders on her table and saw what they truly were. Proof that she had survived being erased. "I didn't touch the server," she said. "I only pulled the key you stole." Gavin stopped breathing. The alarms continued behind him, but in that silence Clara knew he finally understood the part he had never bothered to learn. EcoGrid had always carried something of her that could not be transferred by a forged signature. A boardroom lie, or another woman's company name. 12 months earlier, Clara was still Dr. Clara Vance, co-founder and chief design architect of Vance Urban Systems. Gavin was the chief executive and legal face of the company, the man who handled investors, board politics, city relationships, and public presentations. He was charming where Clara was precise. Clara knew the city at ground level. She knew which streets flooded first, which bus stops stranded night shift workers, and which housing blocks trapped heat because nobody planted shade where poor people waited. EcoGrid came from that knowledge. On paper, it was a $10 million green urban planning proposal. In Clara's hands, it was flood-resistant streets, energy loops, safer transit corridors, stormwater channels, shade routes, and housing access designed around real lives instead of campaign photographs. It had begun after a winter storm flooded a neglected block near South Park, and Clara heard an elderly woman say, "That means they'll fix us last." Clara wrote that sentence in her notebook. And EcoGrid grew from that wound. For years, Clara accepted the arrangement because it seemed practical. She built, Gavin presented. When he said our vision, she heard partnership. Only later would she understand that theft often practices by saying our before it dares to say mine. The week everything changed, Clara was invited to present EcoGrid at a Kyoto Urban Resilience Conference. She almost refused because the final Seattle bid submission was due the same week, but Gavin used tenderness instead of pressure. "Go to Japan," he said. "Let them see the mind behind this. I'll handle the filing." Clara was clear. Her author credentials stayed under her name. Gavin's authority was limited to submission only, and no transfer or restructuring could happen without her written approval. Gavin smiled softly. "This is your work. I'm only carrying the folder through the door." Clara believed him because familiar voices know which doors the heart leaves open. In Kyoto, Clara finally received recognition without Gavin standing half a step in front of her. Researchers questioned her flood modeling. Architects studied her pedestrian corridors. A professor called EcoGrid moral architecture. That night, Gavin told her Savannah Brooks had strengthened the financial structure. Savannah had joined Vance Urban Systems 8 months earlier as a CFO consultant, and small things around her had begun to feel wrong. Board updates arriving late, finance meetings moving without Clara, and Savannah answering ownership questions with confidence she had not earned. "Why is Savannah still involved in the final submission?" Clara asked. Gavin laughed softly. "Don't look for problems from across the ocean." Clara let it pass. While she slept in Kyoto, Gavin used her absence as cover. Her lectures, voicemails, interviews, and internal presentations were gathered to create a synthetic version of her voice. Her exhaustion became instability. Her caution became paranoia. With Savannah's help, Brooks Civic Development LLC was prepared to receive rights Clara never agreed to transfer. When a storm canceled Clara's final panel, she flew home early and decided not to call Gavin because she wanted to surprise him. It was a small, human hope that would embarrass her later. Clara placed her finger on the biometric scanner. Red. She tried again. Red, red. "Your access has been removed," Marcus said softly. "Removed by whom?" Clara asked. Before he answered, Gavin stepped from the elevator in a dark suit, dry, rested, and prepared. Savannah walked beside him, holding Clara's company tablet. On Savannah's wrist was Clara's silver bracelet, the one Julian had bought years earlier, and Clara kept in her office drawer. "You came back early," Gavin said. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I missed you." Clara looked at the red scanner. "Why was my access removed?" Gavin's jaw tightened. "This is not a conversation for the lobby. It became one when I was stopped at my own door." Savannah said the company had taken protective measures. Clara looked at her wrist. "Why are you wearing my bracelet?" Savannah's composure shifted for one fraction of a second. Gavin answered too quickly. "Clara, don't make a scene." That sentence told her everything. He said it like a man who had already told the room she was unstable and was waiting for her to prove it. The visitor door clicked open beside Clara, and that small sound told her Gavin had not brought her upstairs to explain a mistake. He had brought her upstairs to make her removal look legal. She walked through the side entrance with her suitcase, the damp paper bag from Japan, and every detail burning into memory. Gavin's new cologne, Savannah's fingers on Clara's tablet case, Marcus refusing to meet her eyes, and the elevator already waiting for the executive floor. Savannah did not apologize or hide the bracelet. In the elevator wall, they looked like two executives escorting a difficult visitor upstairs. And Clara felt how quickly a room could be trained to see you differently. This was the floor where she had skipped dinners and built EcoGrid line by line, while Gavin learned how to present her work as if charm and ownership were the same thing. A junior planner she had trained lowered his eyes. Someone whispered, "She's here," then went silent. Gavin's assistant called him Mr. Vance and could not say Clara's name. Clara kept her voice low. "You removed my building access, let Savannah carry my tablet, and now your assistant cannot say my name. Which part of this was supposed to feel easy?" Savannah sighed. "This is why the board wanted a controlled conversation." Clara turned toward her. "You were hired as CFO 8 months ago. Do not explain control to the woman whose designs pay for this floor." Gavin's jaw tightened, but he did not raise his voice. He wanted one ugly second he could later use as proof, so Clara gave him nothing. Then they passed her office, and Clara's body stopped. The layered city map she had built from flood data, transit gaps, heat readings, housing complaints, and field notes had been removed. The framed photo of Clara and Julian beside the first EcoGrid model had vanished. Even Julian's old sticky note under her monitor, "Eat real food, Mom," was gone. Savannah stepped into the office, placed Clara's tablet on Clara's desk, sat down in Clara's chair, and lifted the white ceramic mug beside the lamp. Julian had painted that mug when he was 13, with crooked black letters spelling "World's Most Dangerous Mom." Savannah took one slow sip and set it down with a tiny click. The scanner downstairs had rejected Clara's access. "Get out of my chair," Clara said. Savannah smiled carefully. Dr. Clara entered with her suitcase beside her and remained standing near the door. 3 board members appeared on the screen, each wearing the heavy expression of people trying to make fear look like procedure. Savannah took Clara's usual seat to Gavin's right. Gavin opened a folder. The board has taken emergency protective action regarding your role in EcoGrid. Clara looked at the screen. Without notifying a co-founder and chief design architect? No one answered quickly enough. Gavin continued. Your recent conduct raised concerns about your ability to remain attached to the project in a stable and responsible manner. Savannah added, the exhaustion, the late-night messages, the resistance to financial restructuring, and the growing paranoia around authorship. Clara looked directly at her. You mean the messages where I asked why vendors I never approved were billing the project reserve account? Gavin slid a document across the table. Effective immediately. Your executive access is suspended. Your banking authority has been restricted. Your access to EcoGrid files, city submission portals, contractor communications, and internal servers has been revoked. Email, bank, files, portal, contractors, servers. Each word locked another door. Gavin then placed a sealed envelope on the table. You brought divorce papers to a board meeting? She asked. Gavin softened his voice. I wanted everything handled through one responsible process. He tapped another folder. EcoGrid's design rights and bid use authority have been reassigned for continuity. Clara's fingers found the back of a chair. Reassigned to whom? Savannah answered before he could. Brooks Civic Development, LLC. Clara turned toward her. Your company. A civic development entity structured to protect the project from instability. From me? From risk. Clara looked back at Gavin. You transferred my design to the woman sitting in my chair. Gavin answered too fast. You authorized it. The screen changed. A document appeared, with a signature close enough to Clara's that her stomach turned cold. Then Gavin pressed play. Clara's own voice filled the room, calm, tired, and terribly wrong. I, Dr. Clara Vance, authorized the transfer of EcoGrid-related intellectual property and bid use rights to Brooks Civic Development, LLC for administrative filing and strategic deployment. It had her tone and careful pronunciation, but no living breath, no hesitation, no discomfort around words she would never have released casually. That is not me, Clara said. Gavin replied instantly. It is your recorded authorization. Savannah leaned forward. Dr. Vance, denying your own authorization is one of the reasons the board became concerned. Clara looked at the faces on the screen. You heard that and believed it was me? Michael Trent finally spoke. Clara, this is not a final judgment. Gavin had not only stolen EcoGrid. Clara stepped closer to the table, her voice level. Most of you watched me build EcoGrid from the first flood model to the final city-ready submission. You know Gavin cannot explain half the technical layers without my notes. You know Savannah was hired as a CFO, not an architect, not an engineer, not a planner, and not an author. And you know I would never transfer 5 years of work to a company I did not create. Gavin's mask cracked for half a second. Clara, stop. No, Clara said. You needed me to stop. That is why you waited until I was out of the country. Gavin looked towards security. This meeting is over. Clara picked up the divorce envelope and walked out with steady hands. At her office door, Savannah touched the handle of Clara's mug just long enough for Clara to see. Then, outside in the rain, she opened the divorce envelope. One highlighted clause stayed clear enough to cut through the storm. Dr. Clara Vance shall not approach, access, contact, interfere with, or come within 5 miles of any facility, server environment, municipal office, contractor meeting, or official proceeding related to the EcoGrid project pending review of her mental fitness, executive authority, and potential conflict of interest. Gavin had taken her office, her accounts, her voice, her chair, and her project, then drawn an invisible circle around the work she created and placed her outside it. She began to remember details. The signature, the audio, the vendor charges, the dates, Savannah's company name, Gavin's exact words. When her hand finally moved toward her phone, it was not to call Gavin. It was to find the one person who would know where a lie leaves fingerprints. Claire did not call Julian while she was still standing outside Vance Urban Systems, because that was exactly what Gavin would expect from a woman he had cornered. Panic first, proof later. By 9:47 that night, she had rented a small furnished apartment above a laundromat near Capitol Hill. A narrow room with one window facing a brick wall. a humming refrigerator, a couch that dipped in the middle, and a table barely wide enough for her laptop, notebook, and the legal papers Gavin had used to push her outside her own project. The key worked, and after a day when her fingerprint, office, email, banking authority, and even voice had been turned against her, that click in the lock felt like the first thing that still obeyed her. Clara placed her dead company badge on the table, set the muddy tea box beside it, smoothed the divorce papers until the wet edges stopped curling, changed every password she could still access, and turned off location sharing on her phone. She did not cry. Gavin had prepared for tears, rage, confusion, and one careless message he could show the board as proof she was unstable. He had not prepared for Clara to sit down, breathe slowly, and turn humiliation into a timeline. She opened a clean notebook and wrote 5 headings: money, audio, timeline, Savannah, proof. Only then did she call her son. Julian Vance answered on the second ring. "Mom?" he said, and the carefulness in his voice hurt more than panic would have. Julian was 26, a cybersecurity engineer for a forensic security firm, the kind of person companies called after someone deleted logs, forged access, moved funds, or hid a crime inside clean paperwork. Clara gave him the address. 38 minutes later, Julian knocked twice, the same rhythm he had used as a child when he brought her snacks during late-night deadlines. He arrived, soaked from the rain, with a black backpack, 2 laptops, a portable drive, and a paper bag of soup because he knew his mother would remember evidence before dinner. He looked at the badge, the divorce envelope, the muddy tea box, then at Clara's face. For 1 second, he was just a son trying not to show how badly his father had hurt him too. Then his expression hardened. "Did he touch you?" "No." "Did you sign anything?" "No." "Did you take files after they locked you out?" "No." "Did anyone follow you here?" Clara paused because she had not thought to check. Julian softened his voice. "It's okay. We'll assume no, but we'll behave like yes." He created a folder named Clara, Vance, Evidence, and said, "We don't chase him. We make the trail chase him." Clara had expected anger, but Julian pushed the spoon closer to her hand and said, "Eat 3 bites. Then we work." Julian started with the least dramatic files. Finance exports Clara had downloaded before Kyoto, vendor summaries, bid budget reports, contractor approvals, public corporate filings, property records, and City Hall submission receipts saved in her personal archive. "People who steal big things usually hide them in boring places," Julian said. At first, the numbers looked harmless. $8,750 for outreach preparation, $12,400 for stakeholder alignment, $19,600 for bid readiness consulting, $23,000 for technical review support. Julian sorted them by approval date, vendor name, project code, registered agent, and whether Clara had been copied. Then he filtered every payment approved while Clara was in Kyoto, in field review, or removed from finance meetings. The truth did not explode. It lined up. "There," he said. "February 6, $18,000. Mobility impact analysis. Same registered agent. February 27, $22,500. Stakeholder alignment. March 19, $31,000. Bid readiness consulting. April 20, 0. May 3, $41,500. After that, he stops using clean round numbers because clean round numbers look fake. Clara stared at the dates, and the past rearranged itself. Meetings Gavin moved. Updates Savannah answered. Structure he told her not to worry about. Julian saw guilt forming. Don't blame yourself for trusting a husband not to rob you while you were working. Then he opened a public property record near South Lake Union. Unit 4107, he said. Luxury residence. Purchase deposit filed through Brooks Civic Development LLC. Initial down payment $186,000. Then $74,000. Then $92,000. Suspicious project linked flow $421,500. The number stayed on the screen, clean and cold. Not jealousy, not suspicion. A number with dates, entities, movement, and motive. Mom, This wasn't a sudden affair that turned into a bad business decision, Julian said. He built the financial tunnel first. Clara closed her eyes and saw Savannah's fingers around Julian's mug. Gavin saying responsible process as if cruelty became clean when printed on legal paper. When she opened her eyes, the pain had edges. It had dates, it had amounts, it had a root. Julian moved to the next folder. Money gives us motive. Now we need method. Clara tapped the authorization transcript. They played my voice. Julian went still. Did they give you the audio file? No. Then they're afraid of analysis. He opened an old City Hall submission receipt. Clara had set to auto-forward to her personal archive months before her company email was frozen. Buried in the attachment list was CVance, IP, transfer, verbal auth, final, WAV. Julian exhaled. They submitted the voice authorization to City Hall. Clara swallowed. Gavin had not only lied about her, he had made her own voice lie for him. Julian pulled up Clara's public lectures, investor briefings, internal eco-grid walkthroughs, and Kyoto clips. None of them were secret. Gavin could access them without breaking into anything, and somehow that made the violation worse. Julian compared metadata, file rhythm, and phrase structure. It sounds like you because it was trained on you, he said. But it doesn't breathe like you. Real speech is messy. You pause before technical phrases. Your voice drops before words you dislike. In this file, the legal phrases are too clean. The transitions are stitched. A person hesitates. A model smooths. Clara stared at the ridges on the screen. Enough to fool people who already wanted to believe him, Julian said. Then he cross-checked the city upload time against an old board packet. Dad wiped the obvious server logs. The word Dad landed heavily between them. He changed document ownership records, cleaned the project archive access history, and backdated the Brooks transfer packet. He thinks if the company server looks clean, no one can prove when the switch happened. Clara looked at her notebook. Money. Audio. Timeline. Savannah. Proof. Can he get away with that? Julian turned the laptop toward her with a cold little smile. Only if the server is the only place your work exists. Outside, the laundromat dryers thumped like a slow heartbeat. Dad thinks he deleted the file trail, Julian said. But he doesn't know your weird habit. Every time you exported a blueprint, you left a hidden validation layer behind first. For the first time that night, the apartment no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like the beginning of a map Gavin had never seen. Julian looked back at the screen and said, "He erased the door, Mom. He didn't know you marked the walls." Julian's last sentence did not make Clara feel powerful right away. She only sat still beside cold soup, divorce papers, and a black coat still damp from Seattle rain. But under the exhaustion, something precise began to wake up. Gavin had taken the parts of her life he could understand. Office, title, access, chair, voice recording, public presentation. He had never understood the invisible part of her work, and that was exactly what he had stolen without knowing it. Clara pulled her suitcase closer and took out an old hard drive wrapped in a gray scarf. Its casing was scratched. A faded strip of blue tape ran across the top, and a tiny crack near the port reminded Julian how many times he had told her to replace it. Clara placed the drive beside his laptop and said, "Open pre-export originals." Julian looked at her face before he looked at the drive. "Mom, what did you leave inside the files?" The screen filled with raw EcoGrid master files. Not the polished presentation Gavin loved, but the real bones of the project. Flood, pressure layers, heat, risk maps, drainage routes, traffic loads, housing complaint grids, emergency paths, infrastructure overlays, and thousands of quiet corrections Clara had made during nights when Gavin was already asleep beside a future he would later pretend belonged to him. Julian widened the metadata window. "These predate the Brooks submission," he said. Clara shook her head. "Dates help. Dates can still be argued." She pulled her notebook closer. "Before EcoGrid had a name, a contractor copied one of my flood models. I proved it was mine eventually, but eventually is a cruel word when someone has already taken the meeting, the credit, and the benefit of doubt. That was when I stopped trusting anything a thief could edit. A signature can be forged. A server log can be cleaned. So before every master export, I built something into the file that no thief would think to check. Julian's eyes changed. The hidden validation layer. Clara nodded. A biometric watermark, not a logo. It only creates a unique authorship signature. Then I broke that marker into microscopic pixel variations and buried it across non-visual rendering channels. To my validation script, it proves the master file came from me before anyone changed the name on top. Julian leaned back slowly. Dad copied the files, he said, and copied your stamp with them. Clara's voice stayed steady. He thought he was stealing drawings. He stole the proof that they were mine. From that moment, Julian handled everything like evidence. He did not touch Gavin's server, did not open Savannah's accounts, and did not access anything private or protected. He used only Clara's original drive, the finance and board packets she had lawfully saved before Kyoto, the city hall receipt set to auto-forward before her company email was frozen, and public corporate and property records. He made forensic copies, logged each source, time-stamped each extraction, and opened Clara's validation script in read-only mode. Before he pressed run, Julian flexed his fingers once, the nervous habit he had kept since school exams. The scan looked almost disappointing. Gray blocks, coordinate strings, pixel channel values, compression data, and diagnostic lines moving silently across the screen. No hidden picture appeared. Then a thin red line appeared. Validation layer detected. Clara stopped breathing. Julian ran the original master file. He ran the Brooks Civic Development submission from the City Hall receipt. Validation layer detected. Another Brooks file. Same result. The hidden pixel distribution, non-visual channel sequence, compression behavior, and private biometric hash matched with the cold certainty of a lock accepting the only key ever made for it. The eco-grid files Savannah called reassigned were Clara's originals wearing Brooks Civic Development's title block like stolen clothes over a living heartbeat. Julian whispered. He didn't change enough. Clara did not take her eyes off the red line. No, he changed what arrogant people look at. Julian assembled the evidence packet. Original pre-export masters, the Brooks submission, the matching biometric watermark report, suspicious vendor payments, the Unit 4107 record, the City Hall receipt containing the voice authorization file, the forged transfer transcript, and the timeline showing Clara's access had been removed before the rights transfer appeared. Savannah's company was positioned. Clara's voice was fabricated. Clara's access was frozen. EcoGrid's rights were transferred. The server trail was erased. But Gavin had copied the one layer he could not explain away. We do not start with divorce court, Julian said. Clara understood. That is where he wants me. Julian nodded. He can turn divorce court into emotion. Shared assets. He can slow that down for years. Clara looked at the red result. Then we take it somewhere my feelings are not the evidence. Julian said. Copyright authorship and procurement integrity, we make the project itself testify. By dawn, Clara was no longer trying to prove that Gavin had hurt her. Through an intellectual property attorney Julian trusted, they filed an emergency authorship evidence packet with the U.S. Copyright Office and a separate complaint to the Seattle City Procurement Integrity Board. Clara expected an automated reply and weeks of silence while Gavin turned theft into leadership. But at 11:26 a.m., Julian's laptop chimed. Clara read it twice. They saw it, she said. Julian nodded. They saw enough to stop calling it a marriage problem. That afternoon, the city requested live technical verification. By midnight, the EcoGrid submission was placed under high-level security audit, and the procurement board issued Clara limited witness clearance for the upcoming bid hearing, clearly stating that private separation language could not prevent a named complainant from attending a municipal integrity review as an evidence witness. That sentence closed the trap Gavin had set with the 5-mile clause. Clara folded the clearance and placed it inside her black coat, exactly where she had carried the divorce envelope on the night Gavin threw her out. 2 days later, Gavin walked into Seattle City Hall in a dark suit, calm smile, and wedding ring still on his hand because image mattered more than truth. Savannah walked beside him in white, one hand resting on the folder carrying Clara's stolen city. Clara sat in the third row with Julian beside her, present under the city's own witness clearance. Savannah leaned toward Gavin and whispered, "She actually came." Gavin did not turn his head. "Let her watch what closure looks like." Julian's jaw tightened, but Clara touched his wrist. Not yet. Savannah stepped to the microphone first. EcoGrid has always been about protecting the future of Seattle. Gavin followed. This project has survived uncertainty. Today, Seattle chooses continuity. Applause rose as the final award model prepared to display. What Gavin did not know was that the procurement board had attached its own integrity verification overlay to the presentation system, using Clara's validation report as the trigger. Julian had not touched the screen. Clara had not staged a stunt. The city's audit system was waiting for the exact stolen file Gavin was about to present. The blue-green eco-grid model flickered. Savannah's smile stiffened. Gavin looked toward the control table. For half a second, the room held its breath. Then, the whole screen turned red. Gavin did not lose everything when the screen turned red. He began losing it in the silence after that. When everyone inside Seattle City Hall realized the file on stage was not malfunctioning, it was testifying. The applause died in uneven pieces. Gavin stood at the microphone with his polished smile still attached to his face, but the smile had become useless. Savannah stood half a step behind him in white, gripping the Brooks Civic Development folder so tightly the corner bent beneath her thumb. Clara sat 3 rows from the aisle with Julian beside her, the city-issued witness clearance folded inside her black coat. Across the red screen, white letters sharpened with brutal simplicity. Integrity verification. Failure. Embedded biometric authorship. Marker detected. Registered origin. Dr. Clara Vance. Clara's name replaced Gavin's victory model in front of city officials, contractors, donors, reporters, and the same people who had been ready to applaud him into a $10 million award. Gavin looked at the technician first, because men like Gavin always look for someone beneath them to blame before they look at the truth. But the technician turned toward the procurement board instead of Gavin. The city's own audit overlay had rejected the exact file Gavin's team brought for public display. The chair of the procurement board leaned into the microphone. "This hearing is now under formal integrity suspension," he said. "The EcoGrid Award is frozen, pending investigation into misrepresented authorship, forged authorization, compromised bid materials, and potential federal technology procurement fraud." Savannah leaned toward Gavin and whispered, "Say something." It sounded less like support and more like a demand from a woman realizing the man beside her might not be powerful enough to protect her. Gavin cleared his throat. "There has been a misunderstanding," he said. But the sentence came out thin and dry. 2 federal technology procurement investigators entered with city security behind them, accompanied by a procurement financial examiner assigned to preserve the payment trail. Their calm made Gavin look smaller. One investigator requested the live presentation file, the Brooks Civic Development Source Package, the rights transfer packet, the forged voice authorization record, and the device path used to load the final award model. The investigator loaded Savannah's final design file onto a secured city machine, not Julian's evidence drive. It was the file Gavin's own team had submitted for public display through Vance Urban Systems and Brooks Civic Development. Then the result appeared again. Marker confirmed. Chain conflict. Brooks Civic Development submission. Gavin faced the board. "I want counsel present before any further review." The chair nodded. "You will have counsel. Vance Urban Systems is suspended from all active city procurement activity effective immediately." That was the real crash. Before Gavin reached the corridor, his phone lit up. A bank officer left a voicemail about collateral reassessment on the South Lake Union financing package connected to Unit 4107. Then accounting sent the message that stripped the color from his face. The remaining cash reserve in a discretionary operating account had just been moved through an authorization tied to Savannah. Gavin read it once, then again, then looked for her. Savannah was already walking away. Not running, because Savannah Brooks would never let cameras catch panic that honestly, Gavin called her name once, low and sharp. Within hours, Savannah pulled every discretionary dollar she could still reach, routed part of it through a consulting retainer tied to an old Brooks entity, and left Seattle under a corporate travel alias Julian, later matched to a prior filing. She sent Gavin one sentence. "You told me it was clean." Savannah had not loved Gavin's vision. The city attorney referred the matter to a federal procurement fraud unit. Gavin tried to call it temporary, political, a smear campaign by an unstable ex-wife, but the old language stopped working the moment auditors started asking questions. Every time he called Clara emotional, auditors asked about the biometric marker, the forged voice authorization, and Brooks Civic Development's project-linked payments. By the third day, Gavin locked himself inside the top-floor conference room at Vance Urban Systems with the blinds drawn, 3 coffees going cold beside his laptop, and a half-empty bottle of antacid on the table. A junior analyst forwarded an old email thread showing Savannah had asked for cleaner routing language around vendor payments. Gavin read that email and shut the laptop so hard the hinge cracked. Vance Urban Systems was barred from active municipal bidding pending full investigation. Gavin Vance was placed under professional conduct review. The bank demanded accelerated repayment on the project-backed credit line. Gavin's personal guarantee became a noose made of his own handwriting. Near 10:58 p.m., Gavin opened the city portal, searching for one cached copy of the bid file, one remaining version, one administrative mistake he could twist into a system malfunction. Instead, the EcoGrid award file was locked under evidence preservation. At 11:14 p.m., while rain struck the windows of his empty office, he finally called Clara. She was back in the laundromat apartment, sitting at the same small table where the old hard drive had first been opened. Julian was asleep on the couch, with one arm over his eyes, still wearing his shoes. Clara looked at the caller ID through 3 full rings. Her body still reacted to Gavin's name before her mind did. Then she answered. Gavin's breathing came through first, ragged and uneven, stripped of the voice he used for cameras. Clara, he said, what did you do to the City Hall server? The entire bid file is gone. For one quiet second, she remembered Savannah in her chair. Julian's mug in another woman's hand, the divorce papers, the guard who would not let her through, the 5-mile clause, the fake voice, and the boardroom full of people willing to believe she had broken under pressure. Then she looked at the red validation report and understood that her life had finally stepped outside Gavin's version of it. I didn't touch the City Hall server, Gavin, she said. I only pulled the key you stole. Clara used to think victory would feel like noise, but when Gavin's call ended, all she heard was the quiet her body still did not trust. That was what Gavin had stolen deeper than EcoGrid. He had stolen the belief that ordinary things were harmless. When nothing happened after the call, Clara did not feel joy right away. No message, no attorney, no new accusation. Julian shifted in his sleep, then settled again. Clara sat there until she understood the first piece of freedom. Sometimes freedom is only the first night no one reaches into your life to move the walls. The weeks that followed felt like real justice. Slow, careful, and finally beyond Gavin's control. Federal investigators reviewed the evidence. Clara answered only what she knew. When she did not know, she said, I don't know. Then, one gray morning, in a courthouse hallway that smelled like floor polish and burned coffee, Clara's attorney opened the final order. It is all restored, he said. Clara stared at him. All of it? He turned the order toward her. The court restored full EcoGrid authorship, design rights, project authority, derivative rights, and future municipal credit to Dr. Clara Vance. The Copyright Office record and municipal bid file would be corrected, and the city's final approval could proceed only under her restored authorship. When Clara reached the sentence declaring her the sole rightful creator of EcoGrid, her knees weakened, and she had to sit on the wooden bench outside the courtroom. You got it back, Mom, he said, his voice small. No, she said. We got our names back. That was when Julian broke. EcoGrid was never built to make powerful people look good, she said. It was built to keep ordinary people safe. By the next morning, the headlines changed. They stopped calling her Gavin Vance's estranged wife and started calling her the architect behind EcoGrid. When a few board members suggested Vance Urban Systems could be restructured around her, Clara refused before they finished explaining. The coffee machine jammed twice before noon, and Julian stared at it like it had personally betrayed their new company. When the installer placed the new lettering on the glass door, Clara and Julian stood shoulder to shoulder without speaking. Clara stared at the word son longer than she meant to. The city approved the revised EcoGrid contract under Clara's restored authorship, naming Vance & Son Ecodesign as the lead architectural partner. When the financial terms arrived, their attorney slid the folder across the table and said, You can breathe now. Money was no longer just money. It was rent paid without fear, payroll, health insurance, Proper software licenses Gavin could never freeze, a workstation for Julian near the window, and a project budget carrying Clara's name openly instead of hiding behind the signature of the man who stole from her. He only waited beside the elevator until she finished, then said, "Ready?" Like the double-checking was part of the routine, not proof she was still afraid. On the first warm week of spring, Seattle released the updated eco-grid plan with Clara's name on the front page and Julian listed as systems lead. Reporters asked about flood resilience, heat corridors, emergency access, shaded walkways, drainage channels, and why the pilot mattered in neighborhoods that flooded first and cooled last. Clara answered carefully, not because she was afraid, but because truth deserved precision. After the briefing, they walked out through the same municipal building where Clara had once felt like an intruder in her own life. The security scanner accepted her badge on the first try. One soft beep, one green light, one open door. Clara stopped walking. Julian heard it too and looked at her. Neither of them spoke. Some victories are too small for a headline and too large for the body to understand quickly. Months later, when the first eco-grid pilot block broke ground, a little girl in a yellow raincoat stopped beside the temporary barrier and asked her mother why people were drawing on the street. The mother said, "They're making it safer." Clara turned away for a second, because that simple answer hit harder than the ceremony. The last time Clara saw Gavin was not in a courtroom, not in a boardroom, and not under cameras. "I work nights now," he said. "A warehouse outside Kent." "I saw the announcement," he said. "Vance and Son." His mouth tried to smile and failed. "It is a better name than mine ever deserved." Clara felt the old instinct rise. Gavin swallowed. "I thought I was smart because I owned the company," he said. "But I forgot the person who created its soul." The words landed softly, and that made them worse. "I am sorry," Gavin said, and his voice broke. "Not because I lost." Life kept moving around the heaviest conversation Gavin and Clara had ever had, and somehow that made it more real. "I forgive you," she said quietly. Before he could speak, she continued, "Not because what you did was small. I forgive you because I refuse to let your name be the last locked door inside me." Gavin's face broke, but Clara did not step forward to comfort him. Ahead of her, the path opened toward the water, toward the office where Julian was waiting, toward Echo Grid rising street by street, and toward a life that no longer needed Gavin's permission to be true. That evening, Clara returned to Vance and Son Eco Design and found Julian standing by the window, watching spring rain begin again over the street below. He turned when she entered and asked, "Are you okay?" Clara thought about the courthouse bench, the green light at the scanner, the crooked letters on the office door, the little girl in the yellow raincoat, the park bench, Gavin's gray hair, and the quiet inside her chest after she walked away. "I am," she said. Inside, the lights of Vance and Son Eco Design stayed on late, not because Clara was trying to prove her worth anymore, but because this time the future she was building finally belonged to her. And maybe that was the lesson Clara wanted people to remember most. When someone steals your work, your voice, or your place in the world, the goal is not to spend your life proving they were cruel. The goal is to build something so honest and fully yours that even their shadow has nowhere left to stand.